listening to C-Suite Unplugged, a podcast by the Business Council of Alberta, where the province's top executives share their career story, what's happening at their companies, and speak candidly about the most pressing business issues. I'm your host, Adam Legge, and in each episode, I sit down with Alberta's leading CEOs, entrepreneurs, and industry leaders to explore their path to the top and what they're focused on right now. Enjoy the show. From field engineer to president and CEO, today's guest has built his career through the ranks of the oil and gas industry. With early roles at Encana Corporation and Pan-Canadian, and a Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering from the University of Saskatchewan, he brings more than 20 years of experience spanning engineering, operations, finance, and executive leadership. He's now leading one of Canada's top intermediate oil and gas companies, and I know is someone firmly engaged in expanding Canada's role as an exporter of natural resources. In this episode of C-Suite Unplugged, I'm joined by Chris Carlsen, President and CEO of Birchcliff Energy. In our conversation, we talk about his journey to the CEO role, how he's thinking about running the business through cycles, and his perspective on Canada's natural gas opportunity. Well, Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Adam, and thanks for doing everything you're doing to tell stories. So good for you.
We really appreciate you being with us on the podcast today. So let's start with you.
Sure.
Tell us, where did you grow up and what part of this great country do you come from?
Sure. So I grew up in Saskatchewan, Saskatoon specifically, and so I grew up there. My dad and mom both worked in cancer. So my dad was head of the cancer research department at the university, and which evolved into the Cancer Agency of Saskatchewan. And my mom was a radiation therapist in the same building. So they both worked on the university grounds and both were quite heavily involved in cancer and working for the government, so to speak. So yeah, I have a sister who's younger, and really Saskatchewan was a great place to grow up at the time. I spent a lot of time outdoors and just still have a bunch of different friends that I talk to today, and a lot of have migrated out west. I would say if you think about from high school to university, there's certainly a lot of friend group that ended up here in Calgary and in Alberta doing a variety of different things, from energy to woodworking to owning their own business to everything in between. So yeah, it was a great place to grow up.
Nice. So we cut you open, are you bleeding green? You're a Rider Nation guy, or, sort of Stamps?
Yeah, exactly. We never had a hockey team, so we had, not in the NHL anyway, but the reality is, for sure, the Riders, I still have a little bit of a passion there, but I was more of a hockey person growing up. I spent countless hours, playing street hockey with friends, and certainly playing hockey as I grew up, and use that still as a bit of an outlet, I would say, to just think about nothing else for a couple hours, is to go out and skate and hang out with friends. And I still have, quite a bit of joy when I go out and do that in a variety of different leagues. So yeah, it's been a big part of what I've done over the years for sure.
Excellent. Grew up doing the early morning arena visits. Yeah. So do you do like a beer type league now, or just more casual?
I'm sort of, as you get older, you end up on the injury list. So yeah, exactly. Currently I'm on the injury list. But even when I first moved to, and we'll get into some of this history for sure, but I lived in Brooks for a little while, and that was a real impetus to join a hockey team out there, more of a rec beer league type team, and meet a bunch of people and create a bunch of friendships. And that turned into business relationships as well. Once I moved to Calgary, it's the same thing. Some guys from Saskatchewan, as well as some friends from Brooks and some people that were from Calgary, sort of form our team, and play in a bunch of different men's leagues. And it's just a real, say, use it for business, but also use it for just relaxing and thinking about something other than the day to day.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good outlet for the stresses of exexecutive leadership.
Yeah. But you find you get injured quite frequently. So yes, that's where I'm at right now.
My knees agree with you on that one. What was your first job that gave you a paycheck? Was it a paper route or something else?
Yeah, you know what? I was probably into the physical labor when I was younger, for sure, like using the brawn, so to speak. And I think one of the things for me was my parents, as we were around for most of the summers, I would go and put flyers in people's mailboxes and try and cut their lawn and do yard maintenance while they were away at the lake or wherever for the summer. So I spent quite a bit of time doing that. And funny enough, so my son now, I have a 13-year-old boy, a 16-year-old girl, and an 11-year-old girl. But my boy is trying to make some money, and he's been around the neighborhood, and it was probably Friday, the long weekend, he's out delivering flyers and doing whatever. And So he's sort of taken up that role of trying to wash people's tires, cut their lawns, do all that. But I'd say whereas the actual first paycheck, it would have been working for a lumber yard in Saskatoon during the summer and delivering shingles, selling fence and garage packages, delivering them. That was probably the first place. So it was it wasn't a Home Depot, it was called a home building center.
Okay. Yeah. Getting your hands dirty with the real building of the country at one roof or one fence at a time kind of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's awesome. You studied chemical engineering, so I'd be curious what made you choose that path? You had two parents kind of more in the medical field. What drew you to engineering? And then, how did you find yourself in the oil and gas industry after your degree? Yeah,
so during high school, I had probably one influential teacher that I specifically remember, who was our chemistry teacher.
Okay.
He was just really engaging. He made chemistry quite interesting. And I guess maybe a little bit of my dad's background or my parents' background as well. I was quite interested in chemistry, sciences, a little bit of math, and I wasn't very good at English. So I sort of then gravitated towards, okay, I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do, but I was sort of, okay, if you're going to take a year off, you're not living here. And if you're going to go to school, then you can live at home. And well, perfect. Yeah. I'll live at home. So I applied to commerce. I applied to engineering. I ended up going into the engineering department and wasn't sold on chemical engineering in that first year. I was, it's pretty broad spectrum. And then after that, you usually sort of focus on the discipline you're interested in. But I sort of always had that desire, and maybe I found chemistry a little bit more engaging and easy. So I chose that path, and then I had a great time at the University of Saskatchewan. Say the chemical engineering department there was, from my view, we had some of the professors that had written textbooks, and so there's quite a large knowledge base. And at the university, there's the engineering building where a lot of the mechanical and civil and electrical engineers are, but the chemical engineers sort of had our own building in the chemistry building. And it was one of the historic buildings on the university called Thorvaldsen Building. And we had our own little lounge there. And so it was quite good years. And when you think about a lot of the chemical engineers that school, a lot of them are out in Calgary here, working in a variety of companies from Ovintiv now, in Canada, Ovintiv in Canada, Aspen Leaf. Some have gone out to Headwater. So there's a bunch of U of S people that I went to school with that are all out here. So again, it just makes the U of S community, and then you come out here and we've got sort of the energy community, downtown Calgary and beyond. And it's quite a close-knit community when you cut through it all.
Yeah, no, I think there's a huge contingent of Saskatchewan that now domiciles in Alberta, right? So there was a bit of that big wave. Did you come during that sort of, I would say,
early 2000s?
Early 2000s, yeah, late 90s, early 2000s, when everything was just looking up for the energy sector here and the real lift on the oil sands and what have you. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it was... I didn't, like I mentioned, I didn't really know anything about the sector coming from Saskatoon and just my background. So it was all new. And really how I got into it was one of my friends had come back, and again, I had been working in the lumber yard. And then the next summer I was working installing irrigation systems and golf courses. So I was sort of traveling around southern Saskatchewan installing irrigation systems in these golf courses. And a friend of mine came back, and he had gotten a job for the summer with Imperial out of Medicine Hat.
Okay.
And so he came back and was like, hey, I worked in the energy sector. It's unbelievable technology, people, good pay. Like, you should think about that. And so our student center, the next year then I applied, and I actually got a job with Pan Canadian, centered in Brooks as a summer student. And so I went out there, and there was myself and two other students, one from Edmonton, one from U of C, and the three of us sort of just emailed each other and found a place together, and we lived together in this little basement suite behind the Canadian Tire in Brooks. Pretty rustic spot, but that was sort of the first experience or the first foray into energy. And I just remember driving around with the superintendent and all the acronyms and all the lingo. It's quite fascinating. Here's an oil battery, and you don't really like oil battery. Okay, I don't really have that context. Yeah. Here's a gas plant. Here's an oil satellite. Here's one of our slant well, like just all the information, it was an overload, but man, it was quite an impressive industry when you started going around some of these facilities and all the technology. And so that was my first foray into the energy patch, was a summer in Brooks.
Excellent. So let's fast forward. You've got your chemical engineering degree in hand. You're graduating the University of Saskatchewan. Now you're the president CEO of Birchcliff Energy. Fill the gaps. What was the trajectory, and tell us a little bit more about your journey to the CEO role.
Sure. So I was fortunate enough after that first summer in Brooks to get hired back by Pan-Canadian for the next summer, and that was in Drumheller. And so I did another summer in Drumheller, again, out in the field. Like, it was, the field exposure was just second to none. Right. And I still today always encourage our staff, our young people, our new employees, like, you have to get up to the field to see the infrastructure and see the passion of the people in terms of the operatorship and what they've built out there. Like, it's just second to none. So I was really fortunate to have that experience. And then I was fortunate as well to actually get hired on full-time with, it was still at that time, Pan-Canadian Energy, and back in Brooks. So, out of school, I started in Brooks in 2001, and again, was a field production engineer, and we had a field office at that time, and there was a bunch of field engineers and a real solid leader out there named Dean Kamesh, who, was just a visionary when it comes to optimization and production engineering. And so all of us younger engineers that were stationed out there really got to lean on and learn from Dean. And then when Pan-Canadian and AEC merged, they wanted all the field engineers into the Calgary office. They just wanted to run the business differently versus, I'd say more of an asset team style versus a discipline style. So we're under now this new, I'd say, non-matrix style, but more of an asset team level system. So I moved into the Calgary office, I think it was late 22. And so my now wife, but at that time girlfriend, she was living with me in Brooks, and she was doing agriculture sales out there.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
At the same time, herbicides and crop related stuff for environmental sciences. And so we both moved into Calgary 2002. And that was with Encana. And then I stayed with Encana for a few years and did a variety of different positions. And I'd say that company, Encana, really punched above their weight, I would say, in terms of training and opportunity. And if you were eager and you were interested in finding new jobs, they had sort of a web posting. And so I tried a couple different positions there and a couple different assets over that time. And then through hockey, a geologist at Encana had brought me out to this men's hockey league team.
Oh, yeah.
So that was filled with entrepreneurs, landmen, geologists, engineers. And so I had met a lot of these senior people. And funny enough, at that time, Birchcliff was getting started by Miles and Jeff and Jim and Bruno and the crew. But there was another company, a geologist that played on that hockey team, that was starting up a smaller company. And so Dave was his name, and he was partnered with a guy named Kerry Lyons, and they were starting up a junior called Greenfield Energy.
Oh, okay.
And so Greenfield was started 2005. So at that time, I took the leap and took whatever money I had at Pan-Canadian or Encana at the time, stock options and whatever else, and looked at my we still weren't married yet, so looked at my fiance, I guess, and we said, let's put our money into Greenfield. And there was 5 of us that got together at Greenfield. There was Kerry and Dave as sort of the senior leadership, and Roger as our CFO. And then there was a younger geologist named Steve and myself. So the 5 of us sort of ventured off and did a few deals, and that's really drinking out of the fire hose when you get to do everything from reception to surface land to development to trying to manage drilling and completion consultants, everything else. So I was very fortunate to get that opportunity and
so much experience there.
Yeah. And so we had 3 years, we had grown that business from 0 to just under 2,000 barrels a day. And then we ended up selling that in 2008 to Harvest. And of course, again, the typical ups and downs of our industry. You went through a royalty review, you went through the trusts,
the global financial crisis.
Right? So we had gone through a little bit of everything there and sold just before the financial crisis to Harvest.
Timing's everything.
Yeah, timing's everything. So in 2008, that was wrapped up. And then during that process, I had been talking to Harvest, but I decided to, again, through someone I knew through that geology business hockey team, talked to Miles Bosman, who was over at Birchcliff as one of the founders, and I went over to Birchcliff 2 weeks later.
Wow.
So, and then I've been at Birchcliff since, it would have been August 2008.
Wow, so pretty close.
18 years.
18 years, almost 20 years. That's not common, right? I think to have someone with such longevity with one company. Tell me about your journey through Birchcliff and what's made you stick around for 18 plus years.
Yeah, and I think to your point, Adam, is like there's not many companies that have been around for 20 years. And and then on top of that is, for someone to be at a company for 18 years is a long time. So I can say in the beginning, we probably didn't think we would be 20 years that time, right? But I think the Montney, with where it's taken off, and I'd say the opportunity that Birchcliff continues to, I hope from our point of view, provide people, provide our staff, provide our operations staff to continue to grow your career. And there's just so much left to do at Birchcliff, in my mind anyway, in terms of the asset base we have, and the opportunity set in front of us is just, I see years and years, decades of running room there to continue to optimize and grow the business. And so there's no shortage of opportunity within the business. And as you mentioned, I was able to dip my feet into Charlie Lake Oil as sort of an asset team lead. And then that sort of migrated into vice president of engineering opportunity in 2013. And then that sort of morphed into the succession plan that, Jeff and the board and then myself sort of worked through over time. And I was fortunate enough to take over the CEO role from Jeff in October 2023 is when we announced it, and it became effective January 1, 2024. So it's almost been 2.5 years now. That's hard to believe, to be honest.
It goes by so fast.
But definitely big shoes to fill there. At the same time, we had a whole bunch of other promotions and changes within the organization, and that created a whole bunch of opportunity for people, a whole bunch of new perspectives on how we do things, a bunch of fresh ideas, fresh reporting structure. And I can't speak enough to just change in general drives efficiency and drives new ideas. And it's nothing against what was, it's just building on that and just continuing to improve. And I think that's the mindset we have there now, is we got such a solid foundation that was created by the founders, and, the company's really now over the years focused down on the Montney. And we've disposed of a lot of our other assets that we've had over time. And that asset base that we have, it just continues to perform and get better. And it's certainly one of the world-class plays in North America. So we're fortunate.
Yeah. I love the mindset. There's so much more to be done here. I think an industry that frankly has been so challenged for a better part of a decade, if not more, really forced to consolidate and deal with pressures and increasing costs and bad government policy, to still view it as, we're just getting started. There's so much more to do here. It's just a great mindset. So I applaud the way you're bringing that to the company, because it's more than just sort of, we're just going to keep doing what we've been doing. It's about, we've got lots more we're going to do for our employees, our investors, our shareholders.
For sure.
And frankly, based on where you're going with the opportunity for the country and the world, really.
Yeah. No, I echo that. We're in a fortunate place in Canada with the resources that we're blessed with, for sure. And Birchcliff, I'd say, from our point of view, is we've got a lot of different differentiating factors that make that opportunity set quite interesting. And to your point, I feel like we are just getting going. So I just see so much runway in front of us as a company and then as an industry. It just gets me excited, and it's hard to believe, like we just mentioned, 2.5 years have gone by already. There's just lots left to do. And I think that's what keeps everyone, and that's what gets you up in the morning, is lots of challenges, and every day the challenges are different. So that's really what's exciting to me about the sector and about the people we get to work with.
Yeah. Well, we'll touch on the opportunities globally in a little bit here. But as you've grown through the company, built your career, are there any people or moments you'd like to single out as sort of helping shape your leadership style and approach? Mentors, guides, tough learnings that turned into,
Yeah, there's been a ton, for sure. And I think when you think about all the different leaders that I've been fortunate enough to work for and work with, I tried to pick up skill sets from each one And I can take that all the way back to my first job in the field with Dean, who was just so curious. Like I really envy curiosity and then leadership styles all the way through in Canada into that smaller organization, which just teaches you resilience. To your point, you're never out of it, but there's always challenges, right? Like you really have to have I don't want to say you have to have an optimistic mindset, but you can't focus on the negatives. And if you do, you'll just get lost in them because there's always ups and always downs. And I think I've tried to, and maybe it's a bit my personality, and my wife hates this sometimes, but I never get too high in the highs and I never get too low in the lows. And so, we can have the most exciting thing. I'm like, oh yeah, that's great. That's great. And versus banging and jumping off the table. That's just not my personality. But, we've gone through, if I should look back at my history personally, I've just gone through so many different ups and downs and trying to have that level-headed mindset that, people aren't asking, I wonder what type of Chris we're getting today is like, what happened?
What's blowing the door?
And, maybe other people have a different view, but I think my view is I'm pretty calm and collective and I try to just bring that. And, I've seen how our leadership group at Birchcliff, how we managed through COVID and just that constant communication that the leadership team gave to our staff and all of us at the same time. And, just that, hey, it's going to be all right. When this is over, this is how we're going to continue to operate. And just, there was no real panic. The business, as an executive team, we wore some of that business stuff where you're like, oh, geez, what are we going to do now? But I think we had positioned the company and the business that we can withstand the ups and the downs. And I think that's the most important part over time. So a whole bunch of leaders that I've been able to take all little tidbits from over my career, and I try and build that into how I want to lead or how I want to be treated. And so for me, it's, I've learned a lot about communication, making sure that, people feel secure in their job so they can focus on actually creating value, not water cooler talk about, what's going to happen here, what's going to do there. So, trying to communicate, bring people along. I love to interact. I think one of the most important things that Birchcliff has always offered has just been a foundation and our culture built around our people. We know all of our people. We have many family events. I love walking around the hallways, trying to figure out what people are doing, checking in, asking questions, and maybe they don't like it, but I think they do. And I think we all have a laugh. I just really enjoy bringing a small company feel to what in our mind is an intermediate sized company. Like the agility, the care, the fun factor, like all those things are what should get people out of bed wanting to work for Birchcliff or even our sector. So.
Yeah, totally. And there's so much to be said about that stability, even keeledness to leadership. I love the way you put it. Which Chris are we going to get today, right?
Yeah.
No one wants to live in that sort of uncertainty and, is Chris in a good mood or a bad mood or, insert leader X here. Just that even keel enables people to feel far more stable and comfortable in their roles and knowing that they can probably make mistakes and it's not going to result in huge blow-ups, but they learn through that and they can engage with you and know that you're going to respond as a good, steady, normal human, and et cetera. So I think there's a real cultural dynamic that is a testament to that leadership style. So
yeah, and I think it goes all the way through our executive team and our board. Is you can talk to anyone at any time. Like it's a small company feel, everyone's accessible. I have worked at a company where the executive are sort of, I would never get a chance to hardly meet them, right? So so that's just not who I am. It's not what Birchcliff was built on. And so, the executive team we have, I think that's the other thing, is that each one of us brings our own personality and our own contributions in a way that makes a real team. And so people are pushing, right? Some people are, but that's helpful as well. And other people are, whoa, let's slow down a little bit. So when we come to a consensus, it's usually you've got a variety of opinions and a variety of decisions to make together as a group. That's really what we're trying to do.
Yeah. So you've told us about hockey, but what else does Chris do to unwind, or what are your hobbies? What do you do outside of running Birchcliff?
I think my family is the key, to be honest. I just that's one thing I think that puts smiles on your face every day when you get home. And our kids, like I mentioned before, we have a 16-year-old girl who's in grade 11, a 13-year-old boy who's in grade 8, an 11-year-old girl who's grade 6, and then my wife, Jill. So, just love getting home with the family, going to their activities, whatever that is. We spend quite a bit of time back in Saskatchewan when we can. My wife's from a farm south of Kindersley. So we'll get back there, and there's Eston Regional Riverside Park that we'll go to, and our oldest will be a lifeguard there, and my wife used to be a lifeguard there, so there's some tradition. And
good.
A bunch of farm cabins there, so we'll spend a good chunk of July out there working and hanging out and playing a little bit of golf, hitting the pool, checking out her uncle's ranch and then her farm. And so, it really grounds you. And I try and get out there on the weekends when I can. And
I know that place well. Yeah. My kids' grandparents have a cabin down there.
Okay,
so,
there you go.
I played golf on the course, and they learned to swim in the pool there. So it's got a soft spot in their hearts too. Yeah.
So we try and do that. That's great downtime. I like water skiing when I can.
Nice.
Surfing, we'll go out to Vernon if we can and try and surf behind a boat. And if I can do a few pulls on the water ski, like fishing, a lot in Saskatchewan. So we try and do a little bit of everything, but a lot of it's trying to spend time with the family. And I mean, that's one of the important things is how do you balance time? Because time is, the one thing as an executive or other is, everyone's busy. And so how do you divide your time between work and family and your own hobbies? So I try and mix hobbies if I can with work as well, and mix family with the hobbies. And so everything crosses over, but making time for all three, I think is critically important.
Yeah. And that's the one thing you can't manufacture is time, right?
Yeah,
so you have to be very, in roles like yours, the demands on the time exceed the number of hours in a day, right? So you have to be very disciplined about where you allocate that time. So you're a brave soul. Water skiing, I've tried. I'm a downhill skier. Water skiing was not my forte. It ended up a lot of face plants in the water. It's a different shtick than snow skiing for sure.
Yeah,
so.
It's fun. I don't do it enough. We actually went skiing on Sunshine on the weekend.
Oh, the Slush Cup? Yeah.
So we went up there for May Long, which I'd never done.
I've never done the Slush Cup. Yeah, I've heard it's kind of fun.
Conditions were great.
Aren't they staying open even longer now? Yeah. Right. Yeah, it's crazy. What a great year for snow. Yeah.
So any sport we'll try it all. To be honest. So,
exactly. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, let's switch to Birchcliff.
Sure.
So for those who aren't familiar with Birchcliff Energy, tell us what the company is, where it operates, its size, its scale.
Yeah, sure. So Birchcliff, we'd be an intermediate size exploration and production company. So all of our assets are in Alberta, and they're all north of Grand Prairie. So southeast of Dawson Creek, right on the Alberta-BC border in an area called Pouce Coupe and Gordondale. And then just south of that, we have another large asset base in Elmworth, which is right by Goodfair. So all northwestern Alberta. Our assets are all in the Montney Formation, which is a large resource that, extends from almost north of Edmonton all the way up into northeast BC, real vast resource. And so we've been operating there for, 20 years, as we talked about it on the forefront. And I'd say, as an exploration company and development company, our job's to, find the resource, own the mineral rights, drill, complete the well, bring it on production, and sell the gas, oil, or natural gas liquids that come from the subsurface reservoir. Yeah. And so that business is one that can crosses a multitude of disciplines. And so, at our company, we would have everything from surface land, mineral land, accounting, geology, drilling, completions, operations, production, you name it, health and safety. Just the discipline breadth is quite amazing, and an upstream oil and gas company, which keeps it really interesting. And so I think if you think about Birchcliff, then we're about 80,000 BOEs a day of production. There's 4 key pillars to our organization. One would be our asset base. So focused in that Montney asset, as you sort of mentioned, Adam, right off the bat, is one of our pillars has been own and control all the infrastructure and all the mineral rights at almost 100% working interest as much as we can. And that allows us then to control pace of development, allows us to keep our costs low. So a whole bunch of things come with that, operatorship and ownership. So we've had that as a foundation of the company since day one. And that's, again, another tribute to why we've been around for 20 years.
Yeah.
To be honest, you can survive the ups and downs. I'd say the second real key ingredient would be operational excellence, and that's centered around our people and the technical prowess they have and the operational expertise we have up in the field. We have about 120 people in the office downtown Calgary. And like I mentioned, through all the disciplines. And then we've got 100 people up in the field that are all of our employees as well, that are either working out in the field at the well level, they're working at the gas plants, they're rotating, electrician, E&I, so all those folks that are Birchcliff employees as well up in the field. And I'd say why that's important is that they're owners of the stock. They're stock option holders. And so when you have a plant go down at 2 a.m., they're motivated. They're not consultants. They're motivated to get out there and bring the gas plant or bring the wells back on stream. So our assets, our operations, our people, I'd say our financial flexibility. So we've got lots of financial flexibility. We've got 10 banks in our syndicate. Yeah. We have $850 million credit line. We're drawn $423 million. So lots of financial flexibility. We typically run unhedged. So we don't have any fixed price contracts at any of the gas hubs or liquids hubs that we sell our products into. So, you're exposed to these real volatile things that happen, whether it's up or down. But certainly today we're benefiting of that with respect to what's happening with the closure of the strait. Yep. And then I'd say lastly is we have stable returns to our shareholders. So we think about it three different ways. Number one is we offer production growth. It's been 4 to 6% in 25 and probably in 26 here, and then 2% dividend yield. So we've got a dividend that's stable at 2% yield. And then we'll pay our debt down like we did in 25. And our plan is this year we'll pay debt down and convert that debt into equity value for our shareholders, which simply means if the value of the company stays the same, instead of it being market cap plus debt, it's essentially less debt means more market cap. And so someone was asking me about that the other day. So when you add that 4% of debt to equity, we're providing a total return somewhere around 12% for the shareholder.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, you follow in the footsteps of a legend in the industry, Jeff Tonkin. Yeah. How did you see your leadership different than Jeff's, and what were some of the strategic moves or the legacy or imprint you wanted to leave on the company through your leadership versus Jeff's? I agree with your comment wholeheartedly. Like, Jeff is a legend for sure. As one of the founders of our company, he's the chairman of the board. And so that was one of the toughest tasks, I would say, is when he and I were traveling, as we were thinking about a succession plan and how this was potentially going to unfold. I was quite young on the road compared to a lot of the other CEOs at the time. And so I think that's one thing about leadership is, you have to cut your own path. You can't try and replace. And that was my message to the staff, our staff, and the market to a degree, is like, my job's not to replace Jeff, who's an icon and industry legend. Like, I just can't do that. That's Jeff just 2.0 right now. I just, no way I can do that. I think once I realized that and tried to take good qualities from everyone, Jeff included, and sort of form my own style. But it's tough when you're younger and you're leading older people. Yeah, like that. That's not easy. So you got to be pretty comfortable with what you're doing, and you have to earn. You can't demand respect or other from people. You have to earn it. And so I sort of went in with that mindset. Those two things is you have to earn it over time. And the second piece would be I'm not Jeff. I can never be. So I have my own style, right or wrong. And I think Jeff was quite comfortable with that, and so was the board. So. Yeah, I think I do things a little bit differently, or we do things, I should say, as an executive team a little bit differently than previous executive team. But, from a board level, they've been nothing but supportive. So I think our view in the macro overprint that we're in, our goal is to focus on capital efficiency and grow our production into existing infrastructure, which is some of the most profitable growth you can add when you already have all the existing infrastructure built and sitting there, and we're paying property taxes, we're paying the staff out in the field, we're paying a whole host of other things that are embedded in what we're doing today. When you fill it up and fully utilize it, same costs over more production,
all of your per unit costs fall and the business becomes a lot more efficient. So I think that was one of the mandates we had right out of the gate, was sort of changing the lens a little bit and having the focus on growing the asset base and filling the infrastructure alongside a 2% yield on that dividend over the long term, and paying down our debt to create opportunity for future growth, which would be, we talk about our business today at Birchcliff, where all of our production, all of our cash flow, all of our facilities and roads and pipelines and water, everything that we control is own and control today is Puskapay and Gordondale is where all that cash flow and the reserves are coming from.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's the 80,000 barrels a day today, growing to 87.5, 88,000 BOEs a day. And we can have enough running room in that asset base to keep it full for 20 plus years.
Oh, wow.
And so that's the longevity of the 250 square miles of mineral rights we control up there and drilling inventory that exists into the future. And so that's sort of step one. But in addition to that, we control about 150 square miles of mineral rights, about 25 miles to the south of Greater Poos. And that asset's called Elmworth. And so we've only drilled 3 or 4 wells into that asset base, and we've tested them with really strong rates, higher than we would have anticipated originally. And so our next step is, once Puskapay and Gordondale is full, and that asset starts generating a bunch of free cash flow, we'll take some of that excess free cash flow and invest it down in Elmworth to start to grow that asset base. And really, it's all about taking all the technical expertise that we have, all the knowledge, experience of building infrastructure, building roads, drilling, completing, equipping wells, and we'll start to develop down there. And so that's really the exciting part as you move into the future. And so I expect at the end of this year, we'll have our infrastructure full at Greater Poos, and we'll be in a position to potentially make an FID on that Elmworth asset to build a 100 million cubic feet a day plant down there, which would come on in late 28. So essentially a 2-year window to build new infrastructure.
Yeah. It doesn't happen overnight, right?
No.
Yeah. Hey, you mentioned earlier that the decision to own and control much more than a typical energy company would was intentional at the very beginning of the founding of the company. Things can evolve over time, conditions, situations, realities, markets. Do you test that theory every so often to make sure it's right-sized for 2026 versus 2000 when it was first being contemplated? And, is that something that's sort of an ongoing, or is that just a baked-in assumption for Birchcliff?
No, that's a great question, Adam. And it is always ongoing. Yeah. And so, we've been today, over the last number of years, the reality is we've had quite a weak AECO gas price locally. Yeah. And so, in order to have an asset where, I'll give you an example of why owning and controlling is so important, especially in the gas landscape, is if gas is selling for $2 today at AECO, and you're giving $1 or $1.10 to a midstreamer that has built that plant for you, your economic rent, as the commodity prices move up and down, it just gets squeezed. Yeah. And so from our point of view, this infrastructure lasts for 40 years. And so when you invest in it today, you're getting that low cost structure for 20 to 40 years. And if you're in the gas business, with volatility in gas prices, you want to own that infrastructure. Now, we would be having a different conversation if we thought gas was $6 forever. Yeah. A GJ, right? Because now you'd say, well, at $6, and this is always the argument, at $6, now I can go get a 500% rate of return by drilling a well. And the dollar out of that 5, I'm not as worried about. Yeah. And there have been companies that, when gas prices were optimistic, they would potentially sell their infrastructure, but then they're forced with, okay, now gas has been $2 for a long time and their margins are squeezed quite heavily. And so we've taken the position that we're happy to spend money on 40-year infrastructure in that window of gas price that, we see for the next while, which, whatever you want to call it, $2 to $4. Yeah. Pretty happy in that window, and we can make a lot of money. Yeah. And it pays out. It pays out over time. So, and then it's just about increased margin for the business, which means increased cash flow.
Yeah, it enables you to be masters of your own destiny in a different way than a lot of other companies. And the old saying, focus on what you can control, and when you can control more, you have the ability to be more maneuverable and adapt and adjust. So it's a great business model.
And I think you hit on something maybe I didn't touch on, but the reality is when you own and control, you can control your pace of development. So you sort of raise it as if we signed an agreement with somebody else to build the infrastructure, we're generally subject to conditions that we have to fill it by X period of time, no matter what the gas price is. And so when you own and control it, that's why we have infrastructure today that hasn't been filled, because historically after COVID and in some of those years, everyone was focused on shareholder returns and there was no impetus or no desire for growth, right?
Yeah.
And so you can modify your capital allocation framework depending on where you see the macro environment.
Mm-hmm. Was the philosophy around being unhedged also something from origin time, early days, and you carried that on through, or is that a more reasonable?
No, I think that's something that we've, it's certainly been one of the foundations of Birchcliff over time. I'd say one of those things you never say is never say never. But the reality is, I think we manage being unhedged three ways. Number one is own and control that infrastructure so you can control pace of development. Mm-hmm. We've talked about that. We've got quite a strong market diversification, both on the natural gas side, where we sell 40% of our gas at Dawn, just under 20% at NYMEX, the balance at AECO. We've also diversified like where we're selling propane on the world market versus Edmonton, same with butane. So if you diversify your portfolio, you're not subject to one market collapsing on you.
Yeah.
And then the third one would just be don't take on too much debt. And so today, when we've got an $850 million line and our reserves, we could probably borrow more if we really wanted to, but that's not our intent. Our intent is to pay debt down. So, if you have $850 million of available credit capacity to you and you're at 420, keeping that debt low means you can sort of ride out these volatile environments as well. And I think we're seeing the benefit of it today with what's, again, that closure of the strait. Yes. We're benefiting of $195 oil, whatever it is today, the second.
Exactly.
It's moving all over the place.
Tweets. Yeah.
And you don't get squeezed on the royalties, because if you lock in the prices, remember the royalties are always calculated on what the Alberta par price is locally. So when that par price goes up, your royalties go up. And if you've locked in the revenue line, again, your revenue and your margin is getting squeezed.
Yeah. Let's move to the macro picture.
Sure.
Canada, globally, LNG. So kind of big picture, how would you characterize Canada's position in the global LNG market? Obviously, I think lots of people would characterize Canada as late to the game, late to the party. There were several LNG proposals back in earlier part of the 2000s. We've only seen really one come on stream, LNG Canada Phase 1. You're involved in a project, but just maybe paint a picture, kind of where are we and what do you see as the opportunity going forward?
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head, Adam, is that the reality is, if you're wound back, I'm not even going to guess how many years, 5 or 10 years, the U.S. had no LNG exports, and neither did Canada. So it was a 0-0 game.
They were both at the starting line.
0-0 game. And today we have two, almost. They're ramping up slowly here, but the ideal, they'll get to 2 billion cubic feet a day moving off our west coast with LNG Canada. The U.S. has 20. That paints the picture of where the score is at. It's 20-2 for the U.S., but I am somewhat glass half full, and I would say I'm quite optimistic on what's coming. Mm-hmm. And so you saw Shell acquire ARC.
Yep.
I think that's certainly speaks to the assets that we have in Canada. It speaks to the potential for LNG going to a phase 2. If they're producing 2 today, the theory would be they would double it at some point if they decide on an FID. Yep. There's also a couple smaller projects, Cedar LNG and Woodfibre. So you have another 0.7 BCF there. And then Silism's phase 1 is 1.8 BCF a day. So, you can build or paint a picture to have 7-ish BCF a day here in the early 2030s, which I think we need to capitalize on, to be honest. I mean, that's the narrative. And I think we've seen a shift in tone, certainly from the federal government. The tone has shifted. We've got a major projects office. We have some of these projects on the major projects office list. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's a good start. but we need action and we need to get some of these things over the goal line. And so, as you alluded to, Adam, we're part of the Salisms LNG project.
Yeah, tell us about that.
So Salisms is, to be honest, was Jeff Tonkin, our chairman and founder, was really a back of the napkin exercise saying, okay, LNG Canada is great. And hopefully a lot of the Canadian producers will benefit from more egress to the West Coast, and that in theory should be able to raise the local price because now you've got 2 BCF moving offshore out of the market. But the reality was the Canadian producers, we need access to Tidewater and we need access to world price. Jeff and a few other CEOs were early to the game trying to get this going, and it's had a few iterations along the way. And today we sit with 3 different parties that make up Salisms. The first one is Rockies LNG. And so Rockies LNG is essentially the consortium of producers. So Birchcliff and 11 other Canadian producers are part of what's called Rockies LNG. And our goal is to supply the gas.
Yes.
And so that's Rockies foundation, if you will. And then there's Western LNG, and Western LNG is based out of Houston. It's Davis Thames is CEO of Western, and he has experience from previous LNG projects in the US, but he brings a whole variety of experience and deal flow and everything else. And so Western LNG then is responsible for bringing and wrapping the project infrastructure up together and working to sign offtake arrangements at the same time. So if you say, what have we done to date, or what has Western and Rockies done together? We've signed a couple offtake arrangements, one with Total and one with Shell, 2 million tons per annum each.
Wow.
So 2 million tons each. Remember, the project is good for about 12 million tons per annum. So that gives you just some size and scale. And then the third member of the Salisms Consortium is the Niska First Nation. And so Niska, whose traditional territory the project resides, and they have been an instrumental partner in working on the project and pushing it forward. And between Niska Nation and Western LNG, they have bought the pipeline, the old Prince Rupert gas transmission line off TransCanada, and they own it 50-50. And so that really is the linchpin that needs to be built to move the gas from the Montney or from BC out to the West Coast. Yeah. And so the project right now, I'd say, has a bunch of tailwinds with what's going on and the call for more resources from our allies and from the globe in general. There are huge tailwinds on additional offtake to backfill where we want to get to. Ideally, we're, have 10 million tons per annum out of the 12 that signed up with respect to offtake arrangements. On a parallel path, the group's working on costing out the pipeline, costing out the floating LNG facility. And then the producers are in the background evaluating and contributing and working with the other 2 members on, when this all is wrapped up, what are the costs, what is the offtake, and how much gas are we going to supply for each of the 12 producers? So it's got a bunch of momentum for sure. And, coming from an idea to where it is today is quite staggering.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, I'd be curious to get the inside scoop. Given the situation in the Strait and Middle East, is the phone ringing off the hook for countries and purchasers to do offtake agreements for Canadian LNG, despite the fact we don't have yet infrastructure fully built? Because, parts of the world are running out of LNG, out of jet fuel, out of oil and gas, fertilizer. Everything is being constrained in the Strait. But once that war started, did the phone start to ring a lot more than it was before?
For sure. It changed the landscape of how people think about LNG. And I think it's twofold. Number one is, yes, they want more access to LNG over time. But number two is, where are they getting it from? Having diversity of supply.
Yeah.
When they rely on it for power gen or manufacturing or heavy industry or whatever else, when they rely on that, they are coming to Canada asking for that diversity of supply, and they know that the resources in behind it to back it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the real part when some of these large entities come and they see the resource that backs it, they see the projects that are on the table, they see the shipping distance to Asia, and the climate that we have up here in terms of liquefaction is more set for it versus, plus 30 down in the Gulf.
Yeah, exactly.
You're dealing with, 10 to 20 degrees on our West Coast. That's less power, less fuel, and everything else to liquefy. So I think we have a ton of advantages, and you're seeing people, not just Asian buyers, which is quite interesting, right? And so it's been fascinating to see the growth in demand just in the last 3 months or 2 months or 3 months, whatever it has been, Adam. So that project has real tailwinds, and we're excited about that. Hopefully we get into a resolve where the project would come to an FID at some point in the next, ideally by the end of the year. But as you know, these projects are take time to put together.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, what would you hope to see federal and provincial governments do to accelerate the project, for specifically Silicium's, to getting it so that you can be in a position to make an FID and actually then start to build and be shipping? What do you think is in the way? What do we need to do and get right in the next coming months here?
Yeah, so I think, as I mentioned earlier, that tone shift, that is very important. Continued support for natural gas, for creating an LNG market, which we have been hearing, I think goes a long way from the purchaser's end, from the people that are going to end up financing the liquefaction facility and the pipeline, to hear that our federal government and obviously the Alberta and BC governments are all supportive of that. I think that's gone a long way already. Yeah. The reality is we have all the environmental approvals that the project needs. It's going to come down to what are the costs, right? Like that's where the rubber hits the road. We're going to have offtake arrangements. You're going to have the costs. Are the producers enhanced enough to sign production agreements to commit to 20 years or whatever it's going to be, 10, 20 long-term contracts to supply gas? And so, each producer is going to have to look at the economics, and that's where, are we impeding the regulatory framework or policy so much that the costs are astronomical? That's an issue. And so, I think that's where they can be supportive, is in and around helping to manage the cost certainty for a project of this size and scale.
Yeah. It sounds like a lot of the things that have been put forward in some of the changes in the major project reviews, in terms of shortening the timelines, consolidating Indigenous consultation in a centralized body within the federal government, creating some greater certainty, removing some of that very late stage political decision making, handing it over to the Canada Energy Regulator for that sort of base of expertise on the pipeline side. It sounds like that is beginning to create some greater certainty, shrink timelines, which ultimately means less cost, right? So
exactly right. And you're not waiting for an approval with, hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment sitting out there waiting for some approval or something. So I think that's really the create the landscape for opportunity and investment to come here. And that means it's got to be competitive. Like, a lot of the people, a lot of the companies, especially the larger ones, they have other jurisdictions so they can maneuver their capital deployment to. And, from Birchcliff's point of view, we're Alberta focused. We don't have that luxury, but there are a lot of competitors and large entities that can move their capital elsewhere. And that's not good for us as Albertans or Canadians.
Yeah. Chris, what would you say to the average Canadian who may be saying, we don't need to be shipping our natural gas to other parts of the world. We should be doing different things, less focus on fossil fuels. What would you respond to that?
Yeah, I think once you're around the world and you see the desire for energy and how energy is the building block and the foundation of economies around the world, that demand is staggering. And you see it when you restrict the amount of flow from Saudi Arabia around out of the strait. When you see a restriction of flow and that the dire need for energy, and we're getting inbounds from all sorts of different allied nations looking for energy, and we don't have anything to give. And so I think the real message here is we have been blessed with large amounts of resource, whether that's oil and gas, lumber, potash, or you name it. But from the energy lens, we are blessed with massive amounts of energy and hydrocarbons. And so to ship that to the West Coast, liquefy it specifically for gas, but oil's the same case, and ship our responsibly produced hydrocarbons to another nation for them to prosper and displace coal or displace whatever else they're burning to have clean natural gas take that place and reduce emissions on a global basis, we think is hugely powerful. And it's hugely economic for Canada. When you think about all the job opportunities, all the actual GDP and economic activity that's created, it's massive. And it's a massive opportunity, so that unfortunately there will be another crisis some point in time. And when our allies come to us, we have the ability to help and support and provide energy needs. That's really what we need to be doing. And so, you and I were talking about this a little bit earlier, Adam, but the reality is we've spent years and years previously as an industry just, trying to promote our industry, all the good things we're doing, how we're using technology, how we're reducing our footprint. We've spent a lot of time, effort, and money doing that. And I think what's really woken Canadians up has been the tariffs. When Trump has come in and tariffed all of our industries and sectors, and we really woke up to how much we rely on shipping all of our stuff. The easy thing is ship it all to the US. And, yes, it's at a discounted price, but they'll take it all day long. And so I think when you start to have those tariffs create an uncertainty of industry, I think Canadians have really, stood up arm in arm and are like, let's find other markets to export our resources that we're blessed with. And that goes all the way across the value chain. So between that and then now, obviously, the war, I think those are real two critical things that have awoken the Canadian population.
Yeah, that sentiment really has shifted in the past couple of years, hasn't it? To more Canadians supporting development of our resources, exporting our resources to other markets that are not the United States. I don't think anyone's saying don't send anything to the US.
They'll always be our
good customer.
Best customer for sure.
Yeah, but still to diversify that trade basket helps other parts of the world with everything from energy poverty and emissions reduction to jobs and security here in Canada. So
and it's growth.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
growth, right?
That's what we need. Don't be afraid of growth. Chris, we always like to end on an optimistic note. What makes you optimistic about the future for Alberta?
Oh, I think like I mentioned before, I think we are still just getting started. We've accomplished a lot. I'm glass half full on what our province has to offer the world. And our leadership, I think from Danielle Smith and the government down, they understand resources. They are go-getters. I feel very comfortable, I'd say, with what they've been able to accomplish. And they're looking out for our sector and our people. So, I think just continued praise for all the workers in our sector and all the partners that we get to deal with from a Birchcliff point of view. It's bigger than Birchcliff. It's service providers to folks up in the field to safety being the number one priority. So I think when it all comes together, it all works.
Yeah, well, there's tons more to be done for Alberta,
there is.
Right? So, well, Chris, thanks for joining us on the podcast, and wishing you all the best as you continue to lead Birchcliff.
Hey, and thanks for your time, and thanks for doing this. I really enjoy all the other podcasts as well, so keep it going.
Thanks, Chris. Will do. You've been listening to C-Suite Unplugged. As always, it's a privilege to spend some time with the leading executives of our membership. Thank you to our guests this month for sharing their journey and insights. If you enjoyed the conversation, be sure to review and share the podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time with more unfiltered leadership stories from the C-Suite.